Keep yourself in the loop of everything football on the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast. The latest news on and off the field, be it college football, Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, Pac-12, ACC to the NFL. We've got you covered. Listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the GSMC Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeff Malinoff, and we have some exciting offseason stuff to talk about. We have some trades for NFC East teams to look to push that envelope and get winning that division, that unpredictable division, and get into the promised land of the playoffs. And also, we're going to be talking about Sean Payton and his remarks about head coaches and their current signings around the NFL, and his and are they deserving of a shot? Well, we'll ask him. Also, we will talk about the 49ers trade offer to Odell Beckham Jr. is actually released to the public. We'll see what they were offering and what the Giants wanted, and anything else that needs to be discussed, we will discuss. So first things first, we'll talk about those big trades that happened. As Jordan Howard has been traded to the Philadelphia Eagles from the Chicago Bears for a conditional pick, I believe in this year's draft, if I'm not mistaken. And with that being said, I am a little, I guess the word is befuddled about this trade myself, because Jordan has been playing extremely well. I mean, he has had 3 consecutive 3,000-yard seasons in his first 3 years in the NFL. But then you also look at the fact he's on a rookie contract, a 5th-round rookie contract, so he's not getting paid much. And his contract does expire in 2020, which is the next season after this season. So, obviously, it seemed like they were not going to sign him to a big contract because that's probably what he was going to get in the long run. So they just weren't willing to pay Jordan a high extension, which he probably was going to get, and so traded him to the Eagles, got a draft pick out of it. And regardless of that, it looks like the Eagles will be giving him that kind of contract. They did lose Jay Ajayi to an ACL injury, so they are kind of short in the running back situation. So with that being said, it's going to a point where you're looking at who did the right move here. Should the Bears have given him that contract extension because he was playing consistently well? Was it a better move by the Eagles because they also need to re-sign him to a massive deal in 2020 if they want to keep him at least? And with that being said, you also add to the fact of the matter is when it comes down to who needs a running back more, is it the Bears or the Eagles? Obviously, the Eagles, were looking at their best interest and got him in a pretty easy trade, to say the least. It was a very easy one to take if they were asked if they took a conditional round pick for him. And, in general, when you're looking at how talented Howard is, I'm shocked they got rid of him, because in a sense, I was thinking more along the lines of like, this is a talented guy. He's a top back. Like, would you call him a top 10 back? You would put him probably in the lower back of that. But he's definitely a consistently good running back. I mean, 3 consecutive 1,000-yard seasons. That's third in the NFL. He has the third most rushing yards in the NFL since 2016 combined, with over 3,000 yards rushing. And he contributes. He's kind of like an under-the-radar contributor because he's not looked at as highly as like Ezekiel Elliott or a Kareem Hunt or a Nick Chubb or a Saquon Barkley, if you will. But he still contributes with the best of them. And so with that loss, the Bears, and now I feel like there's like more pressure on Mitchell Trubisky to throw the football. It was just nice to rely on the run when you had Jordan Howard really getting in there and getting those yards and getting those first downs and moving the chains for him when he needed to. So with that being said, I think the Eagles got a huge pickup here. I do not know what the contract they will offer him, because I'm assuming they're going to offer him an extensive contract. Maybe this is like a prove it year type of thing where they will trade, if he does well, they will sign into an extension. But honestly, I don't know what this is going to lead to. This is going to be very interesting to say the least. And overall, I'm mainly looking forward to like who's going to get the better, who's going to do better. If the Eagles do better and he has another consecutive 1,000-yard season, Jordan Howard, I would think this is definitely a bad move by the Bears to get rid of him, because he was a very important part of this team, I felt like. And now he's gone, and well, they do have Cohen. That's the thing with the Bears. They do have another good running back. Maybe that was what they were thinking. But I don't know. That consistent 3,000 multi-1,000-yard seasons really is a tough thing to get rid of to me. But again, they made this move, and there's nothing you can do about it anymore, obviously. And regardless, I think how either team does, the Eagles or the Bears at the end of this season, I think they're both going to be fine in the long run. I think, honestly, if I had to pick a team between the we'll talk about the Cowboys trade in a little bit, but if I took between the Cowboys and the Eagles on who's going to win the NFC East, I think I'm leaning towards more of the Eagles. But, both teams are kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Both teams are kind of unpredictable because, like, they started off the season pretty poor, both sides of the ball, and then they both made the playoffs. So it's hard to say really of who is the better team, because they're both pretty inconsistent with how they play throughout the season. They sometimes start off terrible or start off good, and then it goes downhill or uphill from that point on. And then we really don't know what the outcome will be after that. So overall, when it comes down to it, I think it's more along the lines of I guess the advantage will go to whoever's in the wild card or in the division win. But again, they're both probably. I don't think it'll be one team gets the bye and the other won't. I think both will be in the wild card spot. It might be destiny. Both might play each other in the playoffs in the wild card round. But again, there are other teams in the NFC that are kind of getting up there. But usually when you think of Bears and Eagles, you think of like a rivalry and all this kind of thing. So it's kind of surprising overall that they made this trade to get rid of a top-tier running back. In my opinion, he's a top-tier running back over to a rival team. But, sometimes you got to make the move to make the move. And obviously they didn't want to they did not want to have to pay Howard after his contract is up, because it's up for very soon. So I will definitely say that all right, if I had to make a prediction right now, I think Howard's going to be another 1,000-yard rusher. I don't think that's a debate. Maybe it is a debate, but I think he's going to be still consistently good, and I think another 1,000-yard season will not surprise me. So overall, the Eagles made this move for a playoff push, so that's just the bottom line there. As for the opposing NFC East team in the Cowboys, they made a trade to get Robert Quinn, the edge rusher from Miami, for a 6th-round pick. Once again, another steal, in my opinion. And this one's a little different. It's not that they don't want to pay Robert Quinn. I don't believe that's how it should be. I think it's more along the lines of just like they're in a super rebuild mode. They know they're not going to be competing, so they got to get what they can get. But a 6th-round pick, they probably could have gotten a better round pick for him overall, in my opinion. But regardless, this definitely seems like it's a ploy for a let's tank this year for Miami. And I don't know what they're going to be planning to do. They have no quarterback. They have no defense. They have no running back. They have Kenyon Johnson, but, he can't do everything himself, So, obviously, this team is not built to win. This is definitely a team built for failure, and that it just has to be what the end game is to get a top 3, top 4 pick, maybe even a number 1 pick in the draft next year, and get one of those highly touted quarterbacks, or maybe something more. I'm not entirely sure what their plan is, but we'll see how everything turns up. And the thing is, I was thinking that the Miami Dolphins would draft a quarterback this year and not start him right away. I've always been a negative when it comes to that. But anyways, when it comes down to it, I just think that the Dolphins are just sabotaging themselves. I think that is that's obviously pretty obvious, but it's getting to a point like it sounds like I feel like there should be a rule maybe against sabotaging, because obviously they're going for the number 1 pick of the draft. They're not looking to win, and obviously that's cheating the fans a little bit. But again, what fan base? It's Miami, so you can have multiple different opinions when it comes down to this, but regardless, I think that the idea of going after I'm assuming they're going after one of the top tier quarterbacks in the draft. Unknown who they're really looking forward to the most, but regardless, they're going to be going after one. They're going to use him as a franchise guy, and again, they still need to rebuild like crazy. So there's still a lot more to go when it comes down to it, and bottom line is, I give the Dolphins a good 5 years before they win again. I don't even say 6. I don't see them winning for a long, long time. So if you're a Miami Dolphins fan, I suggest you be patient, because you're not seeing a 72 Dolphins team anytime soon. You're not seeing a Dan Marino Dolphins team anytime soon. It's all about rebuild, and they're starting literally from the ground up here, and it's going to be a tough time for them to convince people that this is a place where you can win in the future. So we'll definitely see how things play out, but honestly, if I had to make a guess who has the worst record in the NFL right now, or for this next season, it's going to be the Miami Dolphins. I just truly think that's what it's going to be, and I don't think anyone will disagree with that, to be completely honest. But let's take a short break. When we come back, we'll talk about the Odell Beckham trade that could have been with the 49ers and what they were asking for Odell Beckham Jr., and we'll be right on that when we return.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red-hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's gsmcpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit gsmcpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the GSMC Football Podcast. We just finished up talking about the two trades that happened between Robert Quinn and the Cowboys and Jordan Howard and the Eagles. But moving on from that, let's talk about a certain a trade that didn't happen, that almost happened. Honestly, some people thought it was going to happen. Odell Beckham Jr., not to the Browns, but to the 49ers, was the original, I guess, theory, if you will, when it came down to what they were asking for, or what people were reporting left and right. I think it was after the D Ford trade too, or maybe after the signing of Quan Alexander. I'm not entirely sure the full details on that, but before Odell went to Cleveland, John Lynch on KNBR today said, well, this is his quote. I think, ironically, the fact that we had the number 2 pick made it more difficult because they wanted that badly. They wanted 2 number 1s, and we weren't willing to part with that. It was too valuable of a pick. So 2 number 1s. I'm assuming they went either just that number 2 pick in the draft, or they meant 2 first-rounders from the 49ers. Or they just wanted 2 first, like I said, they want 2 first-rounders in general. I'm not sure what the context actually is for that, but that, no way are they giving up the number 2 pick in the draft. I think it's more along the lines of the number 17 pick makes sense to me. Trading for that, sure. I mean, him being worth that much. So with that being said, I think it honestly came down to the Giants just like taking whatever they could get. Honestly, at that moment, I think they were being a little desperate at the moment. That's why they accepted a 1-round, I think, a first, a third, and Jabril Peppers. So, I think it just led to panic at the end, in my opinion. Personally, but honestly, obviously the Giants are not going to win now. Poor Saquon Barkley has to carry that team on his back and his massive, massive, massive legs. And then the Browns are looking to be Super Bowl contenders, which they are. I would say definitely they are. Like 13-3 isn't a long shot for them. So with that, you move on to like how crucial the wide receiver is in the NFL now. Because look at Amari Cooper, for example. Traded to the Cowboys for a first-round pick. Everyone's like, whoa, what are you guys doing? Why are you trading for a first-round pick? And then they're in the playoffs. They go to the second round of the playoffs. They go to the divisional round. Like, where did that come from? Well, I mean, it kind of showed how valuable Amari Cooper really is. Like, in the right circumstances, he's an elite wide receiver. And so, with that being said, like how the Browns did it, that's going to maybe put him over the top. Because, like, look at the Cowboys, for example. Because if they lose Amari Cooper, who's their other receivers? They have nobody. They lost Cole Beasley, who wasn't even that good to begin with, no offense. And they're dead in the water. Because now Ezekiel Elliott has to run the ball 60 times a game and put himself in risk. So, honestly, Amari Cooper could be one of the most valuable guys. The wide receiver is turning into be one of the most valuable pieces in the entire NFL. Everyone usually says it's just a quarterback. But if you don't have good receivers to throw to, then, well, I guess Tom Brady would be that exception. But again, he has some talented receivers around him regardless. But again, it's just nice to have those elite receivers because wasn't for Amari Cooper, I think everyone can agree if it wasn't for Amari Cooper, they're not making the playoffs. So that's a huge break for the Cowboys. So in that circumstance, yeah, they got a good talented wide receiver out of the deal, and so did the Browns with Odell Beckham. But would he be worth that number 2 pick that the Giants were looking for from the 49ers? And that answer is, I don't think anyone is worth the number 2 pick in the draft or number 1 pick in the draft. They have to be someone extremely special, young, and already elite at like 24 years old. And there's not really anyone like that in the NFL right now, maybe besides like Patrick Mahomes. So with that being said, you got to also look at the facts. And quite frankly, the Niners made the right choice by not going with, not trading their number 2 for Odell Beckham Jr. And there was also then he was also asked about Antonio Brown, and obviously Antonio Brown was linked to the 49ers due to his post and what Jerry Rice said about him wanting to become a 49er. And basically, John Lynch said we didn't want to deal with that kind of drama. We didn't want to deal with that kind of headache, if you will. He didn't say that. I'm just saying what I got from what he said. And the controversies and the kind of headache that Antonio Brown has put on the Steelers in the past, you can understand why you're hesitant to pick up a guy like that. And some just look at the talent and not the personality, and I understand that. But the Niners are looking at the personality on that standpoint, and sometimes it's probably the right move in my opinion. So, with that being said, back to Odell Beckham Jr. The Giants said they wanted 2 number 1 picks. I'm assuming that meant just in general for this draft, and they're getting them in their number 6 overall pick and number 17 overall pick. Number 6 is still a question mark, and number 17 is even a bigger question mark due to the fact that if they do get Josh Rosen, that number 6 pick could legitimately be anything. And I think they're going to go for maybe a wide receiver in the second first-round pick because they lost Odell Beckham. I'm not sure what their game plan is overall. But losing Odell Beckham Jr. is tough, mainly on Saquon Barkley. But again, I don't think the Giants are going to be competing for a long period of time. And I think Barkley's going to be that shining light at the end of the tunnel that you got to build the team. You got to build a team around Barkley and Barkley alone, and you got to just cut. And the worst part is they cut out like Oliver Vernon, who I thought was a pretty good defensive player as well. So they questionably got rid of some key players, in my opinion. The Giants did. So it's honestly like they're planning on tanking, just like the Dolphins are. So maybe the plan is it's a tankathon between the Giants and the Miami Dolphins, and who's going to be the number 1 overall pick. And so, again, we have no idea who the number 1 pick is going to be in next year's draft because it was Bosa for the longest period of time this year. I keep saying that, and then all of a sudden now it's Kyler Murray. So every time I see the mock draft this early in the season, or like after, there's probably going to be a mock draft for next season after this year's draft, and whoever is the first overall pick, it's hard to talk. I'm going to take it with a grain of salt because of the fact that, like, how do we know this guy's actually going to be the first number 1 pick? Because we keep thinking one guy's going to be the number 1 pick. Like Josh Rosen last year was supposed to be the number 1 overall pick, and then Baker Mayfield became the number 1 overall pick. And so we really never know who's going to be the number 1 overall pick until like less than a month from the draft. And look, behold, we're less than a month from the draft, and we kind of know who's going to be the number 1 overall pick. So let's take a short break. When we come back, we'll talk about other signings in the NFL. So it's Isaiah Crowell to the Raiders, and does that boost their running game at all, even without Marshawn Lynch? Let's face it, probably not. We'll also be talking about Sean Payton and his thoughts about the recent signings of coaches and what is if they were the smart choices or not. And we'll talk all about that right after this, so don't go away.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA, from the UFC to extreme cage fighting. They got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back, everyone, to the GSMC Football Podcast. We just left off with the news of the the trading information between the 49ers and the Giants for Odell Beckham Jr. and what became of that and the aftermath and all that other things. Now let's talk about Sean Payton, as he was asked about, or he was talking about at least, about the certain new head coaches that were signed to certain teams. And basically, he was basically kind of bashing them a little bit, saying everyone's looking for the next Sean McVay and giving these guys opportunities when other guys deserve some other guys deserve the opportunity more than these guys, but they keep looking for the next young Sean McVay type coach. And I kind of get what he was talking about. I think everyone understands what he's talking about. These just young, inexperienced head coaches at least, that are getting signed are basically like trying to be Sean McVay absolutely. Like, look at Sean McVay. He was basically a virtual unknown before becoming the head coach of the Los Angeles Rams, and lo and behold, he was in the Super Bowl this recent Super Bowl. They didn't win, but for his age and making the Super Bowl, the fact that he played in college the same time that Julian Edelman played in college is absolutely absurd to me. That they were playing football at the exact same time. Not one was a coach and one was a player. They were both players. I just think that's very funny to think one is an actual head coach and the other one is just is still a player. Just how much everything has changed since then. So with that being said, going back to Sean Payton's actual comments, I happen to agree with them. I think there are a lot of NFL organizations and franchises that are looking to get that next young generational coach, and obviously a lot of these are going to be strikeouts. It's hard to say whether or not these guys are going to be great or not. It's too early to tell, but it's a lot of risk to put on these young coaches. But if you're going to go with these young coaches, I will not stress enough that you have to be patient with them. You can't pull with the Cardinals did and fire your 1-year coach. I think if you're going to trust this guy, you're like, oh, okay, I like this guy. I like what he's capable of, and I like his potential. So let's go with it. And then you fire him after a very short period of time. Well, then you just doom yourselves. Keep changing coaches is never the best idea, of course. So, with that being said, all the new head coaches, I know they sign multi-year deals, and that's how it works and all this kind of stuff. But 2 years or 3 years, to be completely honest, is not enough time to see what a coach is capable of. Let's look at Bill Belichick. When he was starting in the 90s with the Cleveland Browns, he had about 4 years. And after that fourth season, before they announced their move, they were looking at championship contenders. And then, of course, Art Modell announced the move, and everything just fell apart from there. So it was just it was basically it was doomed as soon as he announced their move, meaning Art Modell, that is. But they could have easily made the playoffs with the talent they had on that team. So with that being said, I think it's more along the lines of going into a new coach or a young coach or a coach experienced more in other aspects of the game, not head coach. You got to be patient. You got to give him more time. You got to basically be lenient when it comes to early in the season because of the facts that this is their first time. You're not going to be great right off the bat, especially in a capacity like the NFL. I think there's more along the lines of potential greatness if you give him the time. Patience is a virtue, and no more valuable than in the NFL and a head coaching position. Some players, sometimes you already can see what they're about, and they turn out to be fool's gold, if you will. Others, sometimes they are really good when they get more and more experience. And I think this goes with coaches. You get better with experience as a head coach. I don't think there's any denial in that. And then you're looking at the new coaches now. A lot of these guys are first-year coaches. Freddie Kitchens and Cliff Kingsbury are the two that come to mind the most. But looking also at Adam Gase with the Jets and his wide, haunting eyes that scar me to this day. I think it's going to a point where you cannot be judgmental after 1 year. You cannot be judgmental after 2 years. In the last 5 seasons, I've seen at least two coaches fired after 1 year. Chip Kelly with the 49ers, and then Wilkes with the Cardinals. Obviously, those were instant regret type of things, or just we need a coach for this season. We got to just get somebody, pick someone out of a hat, and you pick somebody out of a hat. That's just basically how that went. And then, of course, I am still on the impression that I think these coaches still have potential, and I hope they get the opportunity. But I can see a one-and-done coach again. I really could. But, again, when it comes to a head coach, patience, I cannot stress that enough. And, of course, there's always problems with the team versus the coach and those kind of things. So you can understand in a sense of how some coaches get fired quickly, some don't. And of course, always with the management, how that goes. So there's always going to be those outcomes. But for what Champagne said, I agree with. I do agree with what he said. And, I mean, he's one of the longest tenured coaches in the NFL. So he's doing something right. So you got to just think about it like that, in that sense of it's that sense of the word. So overall, maybe obviously coaches are also in that stance of where they are probably the most pressurized coach. The most pressurized coach, that'd make sense. The most pressured in the when it comes down to just making the team good. Sometimes it's the quarterback, but sometimes it's you've got a lot of the fingers point at the head coach, so there's a lot of tough skin you got to put into it. So I guess there's a lot of aspects of why coaches get fired. I always think those one-and-done coaches, that's a little premature, or even 2 years is a little premature to me personally. But overall, I would definitely say that Champagne has a point. A lot of teams kind of jump the gun when they think, "Oh, that's the next McVay. He's young. He's he's talented, he can do this. And then of course there's the over-exaggeration of what he's capable of and true colors being shown and all that other kind of things. So we'll see how everything plays out. Obviously, all these coaches are on poor teams, so hopefully they will get the patience that they rightfully deserve, and we'll see how everything turns out. And also, just moving on from that, Isaiah Crowell has signed to the Oakland Raiders. As we all know, they no longer have Marshawn Lynch. It seems like he's retired. It seems like he's done with the NFL. Maybe he's going to be back. It's unsure. He hasn't re-signed any contract. He's still a free agent at the moment, so we'll see how that goes. But getting Isaiah Crowell is, I would say, a good pickup. He had a couple of good games with the Jets. I'm pretty sure he had over a 200-yard game at one point, so it makes sense in that standpoint to go after him. Also, you know what? Also, I was just thinking more along the lines of he has the ability for breakout games, but he's not a guy you would absolutely rely on. So I feel like he's a decent pickup. I think it was like a 1-year contract as well. So it was really nothing nothing too outrageous to get him. So regardless, I think this was I wouldn't say he's a replacement for Marshawn Lynch, because Marshawn Lynch was kind of a disappointment just due to his old age, and I mean that was just how everything is working out. So I will say that I won't say that Crowell will get like a 1,000-yard season by any means. I'll say like 500 yards. Oh, that's probably bad. I'll say 750. 750 with a handful of touchdowns, because he'll probably get red zone touches a lot. But we'll take another short break, and when we come back, we'll finish up with other football news that needs to be discussed. We'll be right back right after this.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts, past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
Welcome back to the GSMC Football Podcast. Finished up today here. We were talking about the Cowboys and Robert Quinn. Now let's go on to the other side of that edge rush and DeMarcus Lawrence, as he's asking for $20+ million for his services after he got franchise tag. He doesn't want to be franchise tag. He wants a big deal, and he asked for $20+ million. And also there was talks with Dak Prescott, and he wants $30+ million. So basically, two ideal players for their team, two crucial players for their team, if you will, are asking for $50+ million, maybe even 60 of how much they're gonna what they're asking for total. And the question is, which one is more, I guess, easier to give up? Because they're going to ask these contracts, and obviously if they don't get them, it's going to be in that standpoint of, oh, well, I'm not needed here kind of talk. So that's kind of how I see it all going down. And I really don't know who, or fact of it is, I really don't know who's going to be kept. I'm leaning more towards Prescott. But since the thing is, they franchise tagged Lawrence. So you have him for the year, at least. Why not trade him? You could probably get a Khalil Mack type of trade. I know it's probably not the best idea in general to do that because he's such a good player and all, but I mean, he's asking for a lot of money. You probably can't afford that, and because you have to deal with also Amari Cooper's future contract as well as Ezekiel Elliott's future contract, and then you also have to deal with your quarterback's future contract. So you got to make a choice of who you get to get rid of. You can't have all of them because they're all going to ask for an absurd amount of money, and you got to just make sure you don't give them all. You can't give them all those contracts. There's a reason, there's a reason we have a salary cap and all that good stuff. So with that being said, I still say DeMarcus Lawrence is probably the least valuable out of them because of the fact Ezekiel Elliott is the most valuable. You have to give him the money. Dak Prescott, you could probably get a quarterback elsewhere. As for an elite wide receiver, that is hard to come by, like I was saying before. So it's hard to... You're obviously not getting rid of... That one thing's for sure. You're not getting rid of Ezekiel Elliott. You're not getting... And you shouldn't at least get rid of Amari Cooper. So it looks like DeMarcus Lawrence is the outside guy looking in, if you will. So if you're not going to sign him to one of his big deals, trade him. Trade him for a couple of draft picks, and then that team will be the one that gives him all the money. And it might end up like what the Raiders and Bears did, but in a term of sense, that there's a difference between those two. And the fact is, you have three other players you need to get those extended contracts to, and two of them are absolutely crucial to have, more crucial to have over DeMarcus Lawrence. And you can even say all three of them have more of a factor or more of a crucial to sign than DeMarcus Lawrence. So it's just a matter of how many guys you want to give up, or who is more what's the word I'm looking for? Who is more expendable? And since you got Robert Quinn, maybe DeMarcus Lawrence is more expendable. And maybe they will do the trade. Or I feel like a trade will be easier because you're going to get something out of it instead of just cutting them and getting nothing out of it. I just feel like there's something better to really do in the long run. But we'll see how everything turns out. Maybe they will sign Lawrence and maybe have to sacrifice Amari Cooper, which will not be the right choice in my opinion. But we'll see how everything turns out in the long run. But that should be our show for the day, and that's it for me. This is my last football podcast. This was my first podcast, I believe, doing ever too, which is pretty cool. It's when I first started 7 months ago. And I do have to say I've enjoyed every single time I've been here doing the podcast for Golden State Media Concepts. Whether you agreed with me, thought I was crazy, or agreed with me, I absolutely 100% enjoyed every second of it. And I will take all that I've learned here and learn from it, and hopefully get more opportunities like this amazing opportunity I've gotten here in the future. But as for now, I'm Jeff Malinoff. I'll see you later.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.